Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. What's up, folks? I am here today with Joe Sheffield, strength coach and strongman. What's up, Joe?
Hey, how you doing, Paul? Good to see you.
I'm good, man. It's good to have you on here. I literally, strongman is something I know absolutely zero about, dude. I'm a knucklehead bodybuilder.
Yeah. So yeah.
I just know how to eat chicken and rice and squeeze in pose and squeeze my arms when I do bicep curls. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah, training wise, we're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum, like we talked about. I'm doing the most dangerous stuff possible. I've got a couple 21-year-old college football players I'm training with this summer who are just putting me through, really putting me through it, and kind of working out. I'm going to be 40 this summer, and I'm making a comeback from strongman. So I've had about 5 years off of competing, and so in the fall I'm doing Great Lakes Strongest Man. So I've been training for that really intensely. I'm about 10 weeks out right now. So it means I'm really sore.
Strongman's cool, man. We have some guys at our gym that train it, and I watch it. It's man, you got to be, not only do you have to be strong, you have to be in shape too, cardiovascular wise. It's both.
Yep, you got to be able to move your feet too. Yeah, you got to be explosive. You got to be able to do overhead. There's a lot of strength qualities. I call it like the mixed martial arts of strength sports because it combines so many different things: power, strongman, Highland games, stone lifting. Sometimes even arm wrestling, moss wrestling, stuff like that. So that's kind of what got me interested in it. It is the most extreme of the strength sports. You really have to be good at everything. So it kind of keeps things new and interesting all the time, but also dangerous. So that's kind of where we depart training wise, is you're trying to get as big as possible, as safely as possible. And I'm still risking myself every time I step in the gym.
well, life is no fun unless you're living in the margins and taking a chance here and there.
Yeah,
that's where the best things happen.
Yeah, it's not fun unless somebody can get hurt. I think that's a pretty good rule of life.
Like, I know, like, people like talk about bodybuilding being nuts, and I'm like, man, it's nothing like climbing Mount Everest or doing some. I mean, even football, man, football's crazy.
Yeah, sprinting 50 yards and running into somebody with your face as hard as you can. Like when I was a kid, they didn't even think that was bad for you. Concussions, you'll be fine. You know.
I mean, you can God, I don't remember what the study it was, but like football players just do not live as long as regular people, man, just from the beating they put themselves through. But I don't know. I'm a quality, not a quantity kind of guy. If I shave a few years off my life doing some cool shit that nobody else is doing, I'm okay with that compromise.
Yeah,
I may change my mind when I'm 75 or 70 and on my deathbed. I don't know, but that's sort of my thought process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's the average lifespan of an NFL football player is 55 years old. So those guys
it's nuts.
They're giving up 20 years of their life to do that, you know?
And I remember like with linemen, like defensive and offensive linemen, it was even lower, I think.
Yeah.
Professional wrestling, even, I mean, people make fun of professional wrestling. Those guys don't live a long time either, man. They're beating the crap out of each other.
Yeah, jumping and bouncing around, all that stuff that part of it's real, man. That's a lot of wear and tear on your body.
Yeah, I've had some professional wrestlers I've helped out, man, and it's brutal, man. Some of the stuff that they put themselves through. It's not a joke, man. I mean, even though it's scripted and something painted out, I mean, they're beating themselves up.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's real in that aspect. So
I would think for sports like football, and you talked about hockey earlier, that strongman and the attributes you are enhancing through strongman probably translate well to both of those.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a funny connection. Is that the guy, the pro hockey player I worked for when he was an active player, he trained with Charles Poliquin. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yeah, Charles is everybody knows Charles.
Yeah. So he trained with him directly, and then he trained later with Art McDermott, who was a pro strongman. And that was the first book I read on strongman, was Charles Poliquin and Art McDermott's book on strongman. And so he believes, just as Poliquin would, in a sport like hockey, you develop as much general strength as possible, but then you have to apply that to your sport. It's like I can get your squat and your deadlift and your bench press up, but it's not going to necessarily make you score a goal. You're going to have to apply that, through skill. And that's kind of the separation that they make. And that's kind of why it works for me in that sport, is that it is kind of so different from any of the,
Man, I should have looked this up before we talked, but I remember, God damn it, where did I read this at? It was the other day or two. They was talking about like Russia with hockey players, like how they start these kids off like at 5, 6 years old, working on skills and strength, like crazy young, and they have this whole theory about how you need to develop a certain dexterity skills and stuff first, and then it was an interesting article, but how they have like an entire system ironed out for how they do it.
Yeah, that's actually something I studied in college. I have a master's degree in exercise science, and that was a big area of study, was what they call the Lifetime Sports Mastery Program in the old Soviet Union, because they actually put the real scientists on the case.
Yeah.
Studying these things, where in America, we usually had like a guru style coach that kind of had their own way of doing things. And, when you were a coach in the Soviet Union, you had to go and you had a board to report to of scientists and say, I'm training these athletes like this because of X, Y, and Z. And you had to be able to defend yourself, and there was other people putting input into that. And so that's where a lot of the actual research on exercise science came from there. And that's what, they found, because they were a communist country. They would go through a school and sort kids out and say, if you qualified in whatever, like for example, in the Olympic weightlifting program, they would go with a dynamometer for grip strength. And if you scored in the 95th percentile or higher, they would snatch you up to the Olympic weightlifting school. Okay. And so they actually combed through kids and picked them out and developed them. And then let's say if you're a female gymnast and you were doing a gymnastics program, but you grew to be over 5'5", they would put you in a weightlifting program. Like they had a system for dealing with all different kinds of things that we never had in this country.
Yeah, I went down the rabbit hole reading about it. It was really fascinating, like how in China does the same shit too, I think.
Oh, they're doing it right now.
Yeah, they're doing it right. They're doing it right now. But it was very interesting. Well, I have a PhD in bro science, so that's my background. I just read a lot of stuff. I'm a nerd, man. But no, it was really fascinating how they just have systematically created these programs, and it's all science based. It was well researched and very interesting. I know it's the same true with powerlifting. A lot of the modern powerlifting is derived from what I understand. You would know more than me, but from the research that was done in Russia.
Yeah, because in Russia, let's say like Tudor Bompa, who's a famous track and field strength coach. He graduated at the top of his class at the math university, and then they put him and said, okay, here's your first job. You're going to run the Olympic sports program. Okay. So that was the difference between what they were doing over there and what was happening in America at the time.
That may have been the dude I was reading about that came up with like the whole system of formulas for figuring out sub maximal lifts and how to progress all that. I remember reading about it. It was some math guy in Russia that came up with that whole system of programming all of that out.
Well, yeah, there was A.S. Prilipin, whose Prilipin's chart is the basis of Westside Barbell and all their programs.
Yeah, maybe that was what it was. Yeah, I don't recall the names, but my brain's fuzzy. But this was a couple weeks ago. I was reading about this.
Yeah, what he did was he took thousands of weightlifters' logbooks and he tracked which ones were making the most progress, and then he charted what weights they were lifting, and then he put it into a kind of a simple, easy to read chart. And Louis Simmons got a hold of it and then turned that into the Westside Barbell philosophy.
Yeah, that's what was the conjugate system or whatever that he used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I remember hearing about Louis reading and reading about all the Russian stuff and digging into all that. He was just one of those guys that was self-taught, autodidact, I guess. Mm-hmm. He didn't even graduate high school, right? I don't think, right?
I'm not sure on that one. I don't want to verify that. I don't want to get the West Side guys coming.
Yeah, no, I don't know for sure, but I mean, Louis is a legend, and I was just out and did an interview with Dave, and it was interesting talking to him about West Side and all that stuff. It's some pretty cool stories, man. It was pretty neat being there.
Yeah, those were the real garage days. Me and Joe Miller were talking about that for guys like us that lifted weights before the internet was really a thing. It was a little different, wasn't it?
Yeah, man, I remember trying to figure out how to lift, and like there was just no information, and all the stuff in the magazines was just BS and garbage.
Hmm.
And the guys that actually knew what they were doing kept it secret. They
Yeah, it
didn't.
was a secret formula. Yeah.
They didn't want to give anything away, man. They didn't want to tell you how they were eating. They didn't want to tell you how they were training. None of it. It was all closely guarded. I remember the very first gym I worked out at was sort of a, I don't know. There were some hardcore powerlifters that worked out there, and those guys, man, it was like being a member of the club. You didn't get in automatically, man. You had to be around for a while. They had to see you working hard before they let you in.
Yeah, I mean, I have to always tell the story at my strongman club. Like the first time I showed up, the guy that ran it, he looks at me, he goes, because before that I was doing bodybuilding. He looks at me, he goes, "Hey, bodybuilder guy, I'm not going to learn your name for 6 months because you're probably going to quit." This wasn't as friendly and inviting as it was. Couldn't Google, "I want to be a strongman," and just, "Hey, come sign up at our gym." You had to know somebody.
Yeah, I remember like I learned real quick about racking weights. I forgot to rack weights, and dude smacked me in the back of the head and told me, I
Yeah,
was like 16, man. This is a grown man. Smacked me in the back of my head and told me, "Rack your fucking weights, kid." I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
it was serious like that. Kids don't understand. Like it was like,
Yeah.
yeah. And if you really wanted to learn something, you would have to go to the big guy at the gym and like ask him a question. You couldn't just, there was no bodybuilding.com to give you a program and just give you some advice or anything.
Yeah, and unless they saw you around for a while, they'd usually just tell you to go fuck off too.
Yeah.
So that was the part that was that's really changed. I mean, it's cool now that there's so much information out there, but there's also a lot of bad information too. That's the downside.
Yeah. There is one other thing we have in common too before that we were talking about before. Liver King, I'm still pissed at him. um, but like, so I found out, I got a bunch of nephews. My 14-year-old nephew, he's starting to play football and just complaining. He can't gain weight, can't gain weight. And then I found out he's watching Liver King and he hasn't eaten a carb in a year because he thinks he's going to look like a bodybuilder by eating, this low carb diet, man. I'm like, Dad, you can't carve a pebble, buddy. Like you got to put some mass on. And so I had to deal with that. And then so I know you were mad for something else, but
Well, I actually got a hold of his real diet and did a breakdown of it, and the dude was actually eating carbs. He was putting dextrose in his shake, so he was completely full of crap.
Yeah, that's okay. See, that's not primal. Is it not? That's not primal.
No, no, he was put. I remember it was either dextrose or it was maple syrup. That's what it was. I think it was maple syrup that he was putting in his his shakes. It was like some weird ass stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to give it to the guy. He probably made millions of dollars, man. He's smarter than all of us.
I mean,
he's laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, and that's kind of what, when I was talking to John Rivas about it, is like, and that's one reason why I put myself out there a little bit more with my social media and done a few more things is like, there's a lot of, the kids kind of go for the easiest, dumbest thing they can find, especially the 14-year-olds. And there's got to be some good information out there, right? And it's,
Shortcuts sell. I tell guys that all the time. There's all the time people trying to sell shortcuts, and the God's honest truth of it is, and we were talking about it before, it takes a long time, man. It's a lot of freaking work. Like I work with the young bodybuilders and they have their 3-year plan to be on the Olympia stage. And I'm like, yeah, that ain't happening, man. It's just like, even the best, like you look at the best guys, it's usually 7 to 8 years of hard training before they even turn pro.
Yeah, if that's a talented guy too.
Yeah, and that's a talented guy. I mean, that's like a Nick Walker or somebody like that.
Yeah, I tell kids at the gym, I said all the time, but they'll ask me some real super specific question. I can tell they've only been training for a year or two. And I'm just like, man, it's going to take you 10 years to actually get real strong, no matter what you do, whether you're doing sumo conventional or your pinky in 1 inch or out 1 inch or whatever it is. It's going to take a lot of time. People don't like to hear that, do they?
No, I think it was Matt Winning. I saw in an interview. He was talking about he met Ed Cohn. and he was talking about how I think he said he was like 19 years old, squatting 700 pounds, and Ed Cohn told him in another 5 years he could be up to 800, and or whatever it was. I'm throwing arbitrary numbers out there, so don't quote me on this stuff. But and Matt's yeah, Matt said he was like, what?
Yeah, he's like, what do you mean? He's probably thought 5 months, not 5 years.
Yeah. So,
but that's one thing I'll definitely say is, and maybe I don't know if you've ever seen anything different, but just in the lifting world, every time you see a real young phenom, you very, very few times we ever see him carry through and actually have a career. You know, a lot of guys get stuck in that front end and don't realize how much work it's going to take to actually get there.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people are genetically gifted, they don't have to work as hard, and so they don't put. Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time in professional sports too. You'll see the guy that comes in that's a phenom, and then they just fizzle out. And occasionally, you do get the work ethic matches the ability. That does happen, but it's. I mean, for every, I'm a basketball guy, but for every LeBron James, there's 100 dudes that could have been LeBron James that just didn't do it.
Yeah, that's what, like, I saw the Michael Jordan documentary. Man, that guy worked hard. I didn't quite know exactly how much dedication he had, but
oh my God, he was an animal.
Yeah, I didn't realize the extent of it, I guess. But man,
it was interesting too, because he was I think he might have been one of the first NBA guys to incorporate weight training. It was with Tim Grover. He started, it was really rudimentary looking back on it, but he incorporated it because they told guys back then. I remember playing in high school, and they said that it would make you stiff and you wouldn't be able to move.
Yeah, absolutely. That's still a big misconception I have to deal with all the time in the strength training world. People either kind of know or they don't know. But yeah, I mean, it's that's a problem that's been going on since the 1970s with sports coaches, is them trying to interfere with what's going on in the strength side, and they don't really understand it.
So what's your approach, like if you have a young athlete, like high school kid or whatever that wants to excel? What do you do? I mean, a football player or whatever, a hockey player, what's your approach with those guys?
Well, a little bit, it varies by sport, but typically not a ton. And so I start most of my guys with just the basics, basic powerlifting, bench press, squat, deadlift, obviously, and I look at it, the analogy I use is like karate. When you start out, you're doing white belt stuff. Then we move you up to yellow belt. But every kid that's a white belt wants to do the black belt stuff. It's like, hey, coach, when am I going to do the log? Probably never, or it's just not worth it. Certain things for certain athletes are just too dangerous. So with my young guys, my big thing is just building up the big three, their bench, squat, and deadlift, pull-ups too, and maintaining strength balance. But one thing the kids got to do is gain weight and just get bigger, right? I mean, that's the first battle that we all went through. Like you said, you were 165 when you graduated. Was that college?
165, 170, something like that when I graduated college. Yeah.
Got
out of college.
Yeah. So that 100 pounds didn't exactly come overnight, did it?
No, not until I met Dante Trudell, and he told me to eat a lot of food. I'd never eaten so much food until I met that guy. I remember him telling me, I thought there was going to be some super secret sauce to it, and he's like, your primary anabolic is food.
Yeah.
And then hard training and food. That's the secret. I'm like, what?
Yeah, like, okay, and what else? Like,
no, that was pretty much him. Hard training, eat a lot of food. I mean, man, we would do. I would do some stupid stuff. Like I couldn't put weight on, so it would be after workouts. He would have me go. I remember having me go to McDonald's, and I'd get a milkshake and put a scoop of protein powder in it, and have two or three double cheeseburgers with it. That was my post-workout meal. Not that I'm suggesting that now, but.
And that's what I try to explain that to my growing athletes and my young kids, is like, you should not be eating like an adult. Like some of these parents, they're feeding their kids, chicken and broccoli. Like, listen, this kid just burned, 2,000 calories in a hockey game plus a workout. So he can eat McDonald's, or he can have, a shake with ice cream in it and all that stuff. And it comes from the parents. And then like my nephew, same kind of issue, is these kids think that they should look like bodybuilders when they work out, and they kind of use that as their success. And it's like, no, when you're 14, you're not going to look like a bodybuilder. Okay, you might
No.
have abs, but you're not going to have, a chest that pops out and stuff like that. It's just the slow, steady gain in weight. That's what they need to focus
Yeah, and you sort of have to get a little fluffy at first.
on. Yeah.
And then, and I'm not saying obese, but I mean, there is an upper limit I found nutritionally, but yeah, you do sort of have to go through, I don't know, that call it the baby fat phase, but you have to get a little fluffy, a little big, and then you can carve it up afterwards.
Yeah, because I get that complaint all the time from my young lifters. They think that, hey, coach, I'm not looking like a bodybuilder yet. Well, it takes a lifetime of work to do that, right? I
Yep.
mean, shoot, I wasn't able to compete. I competed when I was 25, and I was barely ready to do it. And that was after lifting weights since I was 14.
Yeah, and you see the guys that do it when they're young. I mean, even like, what did Nick Walker say? He started lifting when he was 15, 14, 15, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. For those guys that get their growth spurts out of the way, they can start lifting, real heavy early like that and kind of get a head start. That's what some
How young do you get guys starting lifting? I mean, do you have a thought process on that?
Oh, that's the biggest question that I get actually as a strength coach from parents, from athletes, especially young parents if it's their first kid going through. Like one of the biggest issues, obviously, you talk about or the old wives' tale is that lifting weights is going to make you short or stunt your growth. That's the biggest misconception that I deal with. Okay, so here's where that comes from. It comes from the idea that does playing basketball make you taller? No.
Yeah.
But being short, makes you better at lifting weights, especially in the early stages. So guys that are short tend to have a lot more success in weightlifting, especially in the beginning, especially sports like powerlifting, Olympic lifting, guys with short range of motion. So kind of the idea has become ipso facto, lifting weights makes you short is the same idea that playing basketball makes you tall. No, guys that just have early success in it are usually on the shorter side. So that's kind of where that comes from. As far as scientifically, no, it doesn't do anything to damage a growth plate, something like that. But here's the big but here, is that for young kids pre-puberty, and this is how I separate it, is that you need to focus on endurance and you need to focus on body weight. And not only because that's what they need to build up, because they really can't develop the strength at that age, so there's no point. Okay, so I would much rather have a 12-year-old hockey athlete be able to do 50 push-ups than try to bench press, 135 pounds. Does that make sense?
Yeah, hormonally, they're probably just not in a position to
there's
put
nothing
on it.
there. There's nothing to work with, right? I'm sure, it'd be frustrating with you to work with a client with no hormones. So a kid can develop a lot of strength endurance. So that's what I look at. Okay, I'm trying to get a kid that's, pre-puberty to do 20 pull-ups, to be able to do, walking lunges, 50 body weight squats, a lot of plyometric stuff, that's pre-puberty is when neurological learning is a lot easier to happen. So you train kids pre-puberty, you can work on fast footwork, skills and drills development, things like that will do a lot more good. It's easier to learn a language pre-puberty, anything, the brain's just more plastic. Yep. So that's the type of stuff you focus on. I really love kids to do gymnastics. That's the first thing I'd love a kid to do. If we're going to start out from day one. Wrestling is another great sport that develops because basically gymnastics is like a handbook of how to use your own body, and then wrestling teaches you how to move somebody else's body in space. And then, so those are two great basic ones. And then once we hit that post-puberty phase, then we can go on to full-on lifting. Obviously, we have to do that progressively and, obviously building up lower back strength and things like that to avoid injury. But yeah, that's kind of how I gauge it.
Yeah, my daughter's a volleyball player, and she's almost 16 now. She's almost 6 feet tall, and I got her started lifting when she was 13.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. It's even more important for girls. Even more important because of the injury.
Yeah, and she's stronger than a lot of the boys at her school already, so it's pretty wild to see how kids develop, how fast they develop.
Right. And that's the exciting thing for, when you're training kids is that they make progress so fast is that it's real easy for them to stay interested in it because, if you and I were getting better every time we stepped in the gym, then we'd be a little bit more excited about training, right? But for them, they actually get to go through that.
I'm just trying to hang on at this point, man.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I told you I got two 21-year-old training partners who won't let me off the hook for anything. So I did that on purpose because, man, I've been very sore this summer, but for that very reason. But yeah, and so like for a volleyball athlete in particular, the things that you would want to be working on is like what's called a power to weight ratio. So how strong is she relative to how much she weighs? So
Right.
it's called like high level plyometrics, squatting and deadlifting, but in a manner that's not going to have her gain any weight, just focus on her strength development. And then obviously with any female athlete, the biggest issue is ACL injury prevention. So a ton of hamstring stuff, ton of glute stuff will keep those knees. Luckily, volleyball is a pretty non-contact sport, even though somebody can dive into your leg pretty
Yeah, we
easily.
did travel volleyball this year, and I can't tell you how many ACL injuries I saw, man. It was nuts.
Yeah, yeah. Women are at a 6 times higher rate of injury than men for ACL tears. Big reason is that they have a wider pelvis, so that the hip, so that it's called a Q angle, so that the femurs come down in an angle, and then the knees kind of bow out from down there. And then that if that knee gets driven inside, then that ACL will tear.
Well, I popped both of my ACLs. I've been through that twice. I know what that's like.
Well,
It was
playing
not
basketball.
fun. Both times playing basketball.
Okay, man. Ouch. Guess
Yeah,
that's
in my late 20s, I had some dude fall onto the side of my leg. It was just a freak thing, man. And then a few years ago, like 4 years ago, I was just horsing around and being big, man. It probably is not. I just went to cut and it gave out.
oof.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Most common injury when I worked at Lifetime as a trainer back in my early 20s was older guys in their 50s come out to play a pickup basketball game. They'd come down from a rebound and tear both their quads off. It would happen
oh
about
man,
twice a year.
I officially retired from basketball after that ACL tear. I have not touched
Yeah,
it since.
yeah. Basketball's best left to your 20s and maybe early 30s, I think.
It's funny, like all these injuries, man. I did myself in. It's not so much from weightlifting. It's all been like my shoulders are all wrecked. That's from jujitsu, and then my knees are all tore up from basketball. So
Yeah, and I think one other thing we got in common is I know Mike Israetel. He used to train at Royal Oak Gym. We got a couple training partners in common, and yeah, I love his stuff from like my personal training clients and stuff like that. I think I've heard you mention that that's one of the best programs to actually get bigger without hurting yourself, right?
yeah, I sort of we talked about it before, but I worked with Dante Trudel when I was younger, and really subscribed to that HIT philosophy when it comes to training, and it served me well while my joints held up. But I just, as I've got older, I made the shift. I figured out that I needed to do something different, man, and so I gravitated. I read Mike's book. I went down that rabbit hole, the scientific principles of hypertrophy. So if you haven't read it, it's a fantastic book.
Mhm.
And then he has an entire lecture series that he put up on his YouTube channel that parallel the book. And it's really good, man. It's like he literally goes through each chapter and explains the material in each chapter. And I'm just like, man, this makes perfect sense to
Mhm.
me for where I'm at in my life for and he doesn't speak in absolutes. It's that's what I liked about it. So I that's what I found with training. It's a lot of it is subjective.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, it made a lot of sense to go with a higher volume, picking exercises that work for me. I mean, one of my friends is an exercise physiologist, and I asked him, what's the best? My elbows hurt. What's the best thing to do for triceps? And he's like, the thing that doesn't hurt your elbows. So really, at some point, I heard Israel say something similar, but that's at some point, it really is that simple. But
Yeah. In bodybuilding, it should be, I always tell people this, if you just want to do pure bodybuilding, that should be one of the safest forms of lifting weights that there is. If you're getting hurt doing bodybuilding, it's usually an ego issue. That's
it's
mostly what I see.
it always fascinates me with bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are the most idiotic people when it comes to training. Their training is probably the dumbest out of all of the strength sports, man. Like powerlifting is programmed out, and you have period. It's all periodized, and it's they're you're not training, you're not doing maximal lifts every time you go into the gym. But I mean, literally powerlifters work up over a block to, if I understand it correctly, to a maximal lift where you're going to absolute failure. They're not hitting, they're not living in that danger zone. And literally bodybuilders have this meathead mentality that you have to rip your tricep off the bone every time you go into the gym, and nothing is programmed out. It's all just winging it. And there's no thought put into any of it. At least there hasn't been until like Mike came along and some of the modern guys. It's just fascinating to me that training is so advanced in, even in strongman or sports, but literally bodybuilding is just completely has been improvised and idiotic over the years.
Yeah, I always felt like the training has been left in the Stone Age for bodybuilding. Every time I've seen guys at the gym get injured on a leg press or something like that, I just ask myself, why? Why would you? You don't need to do 1,000 pounds on that leg press. Nobody asks you how much you can lift at your show, right?
No. I tell my guys that all the time. Like when, oh my god, yeah, that's a conversation I have with guys. Like guys, like one guy was like getting all worried about his bench press going down, and I'm like, dude, nobody's going to ask you on stage how much you bench press. They don't even know how much you weigh. It's just what you look like. Like the judges don't even know what you weigh when you get on stage. Like, don't worry about what you weigh. Don't worry about how much you're lifting. Just look the best you can. That's literally the goal of the sport.
Yeah, the guys they can kind of get caught in these other little rabbit holes of trying to impress they think that that's a proxy for progress or something like that.
Well, they can't decide if they're a power lifter or if they're a CrossFitter or if they're a strongman or they're a bodybuilder. There is no, and this is something that Mike Israel talks about, is training specificity. Like you would not train like a soccer player if you were a football player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So why is bodybuilding? Why are you not training specifically for your sport? It's never made any sense to me.
Yeah, and it's like I said, if you do that, you should be relatively safe. You shouldn't be getting hurt on leg extensions, or you can, like you said, you can change exercises, you can work around things. But for me, if I got to lift a 250-pound keg, I got to lift a 250-pound keg. There's no two about it. And that's kind of the difference. Is like like in strength training, you're always seeking to do lots of reps with perfect technique, as heavy as you can. Because it's a learning thing. But it's not very safe.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that's neuromuscular, right?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it's learning. Like my training partners are, like I said, they're a couple. One guy's actually switching over from college football to college lacrosse, and then the other guy's a football player, and he wrestles at Case Western. And we've been training strongman together for the last few months, and we still haven't got anywhere near to half the events. And every time we learn a new one, they're like, okay, put my hands where, I got to do what, and there's just like, and that's one of the guys said, there's just so much to learn. And kind of with that, First Detachment, Joe Miller and I are putting out a book called Old School Strongman in the fall here. That should be coming out.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, so because it is a lot to learn. So one thing we want to do is give people a head start. In the garage days, everybody kind of grabbed you by the collar and told you what to do or what not to do. Even more so, was more likely to happen. But yeah, so I'm trying to re-engage people in the sport. But it's just powerlifting is a lot easier to get into. You do bench press, squat, and deadlift.
Yeah.
And it's a much lower bar entry. You don't need as much coaching. It's just easier to get into. So this is one thing that is kind of a passion project for me that hopefully, like I said, we'll release this fall.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know. I know enough about powerlifting to be dangerous. I just don't even know the first thing about strongman, where to even start.
Yeah, and who does? And that's, like I said, the way I learned it was showing up to a garage full of dudes and standing around and watching. So I got to learn it that way. But like I said, not everybody's got access to a strongman group or the equipment or things like that in their near area. So it's like I said, it's tough to just kind of get going from the ground up. So,
yeah, I see a handful of guys at my gym training. We have actually some pretty good strongman equipment and stuff there, but I really don't see a lot of people training. It's mostly bodybuilders and powerlifters at my gym for the most part.
Yeah, I mean that's typical though. There's just not as many people that do this sport. I would say there's at least 3 to 4 times as many powerlifters as there is strongman. It's just and I'd say there's 10 times more bodybuilders than there's powerlifters and strongmen for that matter.
Strongman draws a big crowd though.
Yeah, it's visually entertaining, and that's when I invited people to my bodybuilding shows, they were like, "What the hell did I just watch?" And they were kind of a little, but my strongman shows, whether you're 7 or 70, people can kind of everybody understands what a car is, or what a keg weighs and things like that. So it's easier to understand.
Yeah, bodybuilding shows are pretty boring, to be honest with you.
Yeah. But one thing people always do say when they did go to shows, that they're always shocked, for people that didn't know anything about the sport, is how different everybody looked, even in the same weight class.
Mm-hmm.
You and I know that. Like, I'll line up all the heavyweights, you get a very different look from number 1 to number 10, or however many guys there are. So I think a lot of that has to do with your training, and your genetics too. I don't know if you're lucky enough to be a small waist guy, but I don't think my pelvis was ever small enough to look that great out there.
Yeah, I got lucky. I got the small hips and the small waist. It's not the greatest for strength, but it's great for bodybuilding.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why I tear ligaments and stuff. I have the small joints and the small. So yeah, I can fit into like 33, 34s when I'm 270, 280.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that definitely helps you with your V taper on stage. That's for sure, right?
Yeah, it gives you the illusion of looking big. It's like Chris Bumstead. Like, I look at that dude and like he looks like he weighs like 30, 40 pounds more than what he does.
Yeah, like, I was so shocked. Does he weigh like 260? Was that it?
On stage, he's like in the 230s. Yeah.
Oh, man, that makes me feel even worse about myself.
Yeah. So it's now I'm sure they're doing, putting him in the sauna to make him make weight. But yeah, he's like, yeah, I think off season he's like 260. He's not crazy big. I mean, even Arnold, in his heyday, I think he was on stage in like 230, 235, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that goes to show you how important genetics and shape are.
Yeah, I weighed more on stage than Arnold, but I don't look like Arnold.
Just like, I think this is right. Is that just a certain way your tendon attachments and just your aesthetics are just, there's kind of only so much you can do, right?
Yeah, and structure, like if you have a smaller bone structure and all that stuff. I mean, there's some people that are blocky, some people that aren't, so that all plays a factor into it. But yeah, literally what makes you a good bodybuilder would probably make you a terrible strength athlete.
Yeah, and I see that all the time, is people kind of end up being a square peg in a round hole because they picked the wrong strength sport.
Yeah.
There's guys like, if you're a shorter guy or a short-limbed guy and you're trying to do strongman, well, guess what? They have equipment's really big, and you got to have a big reach, and you got to have big hands. You got to put things up on high tables and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll tell a guy, like, hey, you would have a lot more immediate success in powerlifting than you ever will in strongman. But like, it's usually an emotional decision, not a biomechanical one.
It's funny you talked about wrestling. I started off with wrestling, and I figured out real quickly that being long and gangly was not good for wrestling. I was better suited for basketball.
Yeah.
I wrestled for 3 years. I was terrible at it. Mediocre, I guess. I got better as I went, but I wasn't great at it. But it did give me a base. It definitely, Jesus Christ, wrestling is the hardest sport to train for, hands down.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that we have common. That I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in college. I was in my college Jiu-Jitsu club, and I actually was getting ready to compete in my first Jiu-Jitsu tournament. And then my car broke down. This is when I was in college. That's the kind of car I had. And then the next week, I did my first strongman show. I got like 18th out of 22 or something terrible, but I fell in love with it, and then I kind of launched off from there. But that was my trajectory. Before that, I was getting really deep into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And jiu-jitsu is so humbling, man. I remember the first time I went in for a class, and the academy I went to was an old school academy, and they sicked a black belt on me on the very first class, man. It was trial by fire, man. And it is this little guy, man, 150, 160 pounds. And I was like, what? I'm like, I feel like I should be able to at least defend myself against this guy. And it was like somebody doing magic to me, man. I got choked. I got armbarred. I got put in shoulder locks. It was like I got tapped out like 8 times in a 5-minute roll, and I'm like, all right, I gotta learn this shit.
Yeah. I just remember I felt like I was illiterate. Like, it was like something I completely did not know anything about. Kept, the natural inclination to give up your back. And, like I said, we had a blue belt in my class that was, 6'2", 165, and I never beat him. it was like fighting an anaconda. You know, you get you rolling one way, and then do, and then next thing you know, you're in an armbar. You know.
Yeah, I mean, a salty blue belt's pretty dangerous on the street, man. You would, and people don't realize like that it's you can do some damage.
Yeah, and I tell everybody, if you get a chance to learn just the basics of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it is literally the difference between life and death. I think it could be.
Well, I've had to use it twice in practical. Literally 2 weeks ago, I had a guy try to steal my wallet when I was in Florida.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, grabbed me and I wrist locked him.
What did he do? Did he just hand your wallet back to you?
Oh, he was screaming, man.
Picked the wrong guy.
I was sitting in my parked car, man. He reached in my window and tried to grab my wallet off my lap.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Okay. Yeah, so see, there's a reason to learn jiu-jitsu, isn't there?
There you go. Yeah, a simple wrist lock can put somebody on their knees.
Yeah, and like the conditioning aspect that you're talking about, I remember because I never wrestled, and so it was extra hard for me to learn jiu-jitsu. But I remember tapping out like when I first started all the time, and guys would be like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "I just can't breathe. I'm out of shape,"
Well, after you do it for a while, I'm sure you experienced it. If you did it for a while, one of the big things they start teaching you is energy management, like literally how to pace yourself. We would do these. I'm like I said, I'm very mediocre, but we used to have these Saturday classes where we would do 90-minute rolls. We would go in for 90 minutes and just go from one person to another. You do a 5-minute roll, take a 1-minute break, 5-minute roll, 1-minute break, but we would do that for 90 minutes straight, and you have to learn how to pace yourself.
Yeah. And still you're in pretty good shape after all that, right?
Yeah. I remember smelling like ammonia. I'm sure I was burning through amino acids and everything. It was terrible.
I remember that's where I got my first case of ringworm. I remember what that was.
Oh yeah, it's a rite of passage getting ringworm going to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I had no concept of what it was, and that's when I was starting to do strongman. And I showed up with a ringworm about this big in my arm. We were doing circus dumbbell.
Ringworm and staph, and then like all the guys that are black belts, like every single black belt's had shoulder surgery at some point.
Oh, what is that, from an uncontrolled armbar or something?
No, probably from shoulder locks. Because like with shoulder locks, like your body doesn't give you, like there's no feedback. Like you like it feel like literally that's how I screwed my one shoulder up. Like I'm okay, I can get out of this. I'm okay, get out of this, and then just pop. So you don't have that pain signal. I don't know what it is about shoulders, but like they're like with somebody's got you in an arm bar or a choke, there's some warning that your body gives you that that you're in trouble. But like shoulder locks you don't have that pain. Just goes from 0 to 60 like that.
Yeah, and don't a lot of jiu-jitsu guys get a bad lower back too? Isn't that also an issue?
Yeah, I've seen that some. I think shoulder injuries seem to be the most common thing guys get. I've seen guys break their arms, but not from arm bars, but from bracing. Putting your arm out when you're falling, or somebody rolling up on your arm. I've seen that guys breaking their wrist. Not keeping your hands tucked in. Yeah. They're always trying to teach you to protect your arms. So those are common injuries that you see. A lot of the schools now that are kind of watered down. They don't really do a lot of rolling anymore. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of
post-COVID. Are they limiting contact or something?
Strip mall jiu-jitsu. It's kind of like what they did to karate and taekwondo. It's like
where they just want to give you a belt and kind of keep you in the system.
Yeah. The academy I went to was a guy that grew up with the Gracies, and they did not hand out belts.
Oh, okay. I can see how that's bad for your membership after a while, though. People get a
little. Oh, yeah. Bad for business, great for making tough competitive. I mean, literally, like I was there for 4 years and I'm still a blue belt, man. So it's like black belts, like it was 12, 15 years to get a black belt at the academy.
Yeah, well, at least that's a real one, right? That's not.
Yeah, a real one. Like you like if you got a Gracie black belt, like a real Gracie black belt, you're a bad MFer.
Okay, so if you got a black belt in 10 years, you'd be speeding through that process, basically, in a legit school.
Yeah, I mean, they have, like the Gracies, they have an hour count with classes. Like when I went there, like it was, like you had to do 500 classes before you were even qualified to test for the next belt. But it was really, that was like the minimum requirement. You didn't like get 500 classes in and go to the professor and say, hey, I'm ready to test for my belt. You got asked.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it could probably end up, yeah.
You didn't ask. They told you when you were ready. So, and then they
take you out for a match.
And really, the belt test is just ceremonial at that point. They go through, like, you go through. There's a list of moves you need to know, and you have to demonstrate those moves, and then you roll. It's like a ceremonial thing, and then they give you the belt. But at that point, you've earned it.
Oh, okay.
Well, you know the story, like where the whole black belt thing came from in Japanese martial arts, right?
No, actually, I don't.
No, they didn't like do belt promotions. It was literally these guys would wear white belts on their kimonos, and they had rolled on the mat so much that the belt would turn black. So that's how you would tell how advanced a practitioner was, by the color of their belt. So like a brown, if the belt had turned brown, you knew the guy was, because they never washed the belts. So that's like a tradition in at least in jiu-jitsu it is. You don't wash your belt.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's probably why you got ringworm.
Yeah, that's right. The ringworm issues might.
I'm probably slaughtering the story, but in traditional Japanese martial arts, that's how you knew an advanced practitioner, because they had rolled on the mat so much that their white belt literally turned black.
Yeah, I like the concept. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, literally, they earned it. You can't say they didn't earn it at that point.
Well, the Japanese are some tough people, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think martial art, I always make a parallel between martial arts and lifting weights. Like I said, there's different varieties of lifting weights are just the equivalent of different varieties of martial arts. They're good for different things. Like
I don't know if you know Cornelius Perkins. He's a British guy. He's a bodybuilding trainer, but I heard him make the comparison of learning how to lift for bodybuilding, like mastering a martial art, that you have to master the lift and learn how the lift works, and it takes years, and you have to be conscious of it and feeling it. And I thought that was a really good analogy. I never really had considered that before.
Yeah, it's like I always say, because this happens kind of in the strength coaching world a lot. Let's say I'm a strength coach and I love Olympic lifting, so I'm making all my athletes of all my different sports do Olympic lifting, when that's just might be unnecessary in a lot of cases. Or it might be with hockey players, I'm worried about the wrists, and that causes unnecessary issues. So instead, I can just as easily use a plyometric or something else that can replace that. But some people get so into their particular their sport or their variety of lifting weights that they try to apply it to everything. And so that's one thing as a coach I'm always trying not to do. Like, yes, I'm a strongman, but you're not going to see any of my hockey players lifting rocks. Okay, like it's just
no, that's smart.
Yeah, it's like you have to don't let your personal preferences kind of interfere with being objective about what's best for somebody else.
No, that's very smart. That you need to program the training out. All right, dude. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I got to wrap this up. Where can people get a hold of you?
So just checking me out on Instagram, Joe Sheffield Strongman. I'm a First Attachment affiliate as well. And so, like I said, through First Attachment, I'm releasing a ebook coming up here in the fall, Old School Strongman. So look out for that.
And I'll put your contact information in the video description below so people can get a hold of you. And I appreciate you coming on, Joe. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Paul, man. It was awesome. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.